of the happy Saki years for good and joy to all the world of man. The wisdom child, that precious jewel, unmatched, unrivaled, was born in Lumbini.
Buddhism by land and sea. Let me give a short introduction to our Datuk Sri Dr. Victor Wee. Datuk Sri has taught the Dharma in Malaysia and Singapore and spoken at numerous Buddhist conferences worldwide. He has led a weekly metta session every Wednesday for the last 20 over years. And what makes him very special to talk on this subject is that Datuk Sri has also led a lot of Buddhist pilgrimages to India, to parts of China along the Silk Roads, as well as to Japan and other countries. So he is more than qualified to speak on such a topic. As an accomplished Buddhist musician, he has also composed many Dharma songs in English and recorded 5 albums with the Wayfarers, which he leads. Currently, he is the professor at Taylor's University, and he was also the former Secretary General of the Ministry of Tourism Malaysia and has served as chairman of the Malaysian Tourism Promotion Board, as well as chairman of the Program Committee of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Datuk Sri has also worked as a senior director at the Economic Planning Unit, Prime Minister's Department, and an advisor to the Ministry of Finance. Datuk Victor Wee obtained his Bachelor of Economics honors at the University of Malaya, his Master of Arts from Brown University, US, and a PhD in Economics from the Bristol University, UK. For his distinguished career at the Malaysian Civil Service, he was awarded the titles of Datuk as well as Datuk Sri from the King and Datuk from the State of Malacca. So let us invite our Datuk Sri to speak on this very topic which many of us are eagerly waiting for, the spread of Buddhism by land and sea. Over to you, Datuk Sri.
Very good evening, my Dharma friends. It's good to have all of you joining this talk this evening. And I must say today is rather ambitious because we want to talk about how Buddhism spread throughout the world as we know it. In some places, Buddhism is like sowing seeds. The soil is very fertile and continues growing. For others, it grew for a while, but after that, it disappeared from that country. But the good thing is that after Buddhism was planted in other land, Buddhism in India disappeared. So if Buddhism did not spread outside India, there will be no trace of Buddhism today. So today we will discover what really happened and what was the process about it. Okay, so let me just share the screen. Buddhism spread both by land and sea. So what I intend to do is just to talk about how Buddhism spread by land, and hopefully there's a halfway point, and we take a 5-minute break in order to refresh ourselves, and then I will continue again to how Buddhism spread by sea. Is that okay? And later on, if you like, you can type in your questions, and Brother Bobby will help to relay that questions over to me, and I'll try my best to respond to your questions. Now, there are factors accounting for the spread of Buddhism. Now, over the centuries, Buddhism spread across South Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia. So Buddhism is pretty much confined within the Asian region. There are some factors that account for the spread of Buddhism. One is the encouragement of missionary work attributed to the Buddha himself. And this resulted in monks and nuns traveling through land and the sea routes. The Buddha himself spent 45 years, sometimes going together with the delegation of monks, but sometimes he goes alone. For 45 years, he has actually been walking around the Gangetic plains, teaching the Dhamma. So the Buddha is really the best example. And we know that after the first rainy season, there were 60 monks with him. First, there were 5 monks, right? The 5 monks. And then Yasa came and joined him. And together with Yasa was his 54 friends. So in the first rainy season, there were 60 monks. At the end of it, the Buddha sent them in different directions in order to bring the good word. The second thing is that Buddhism was supported by rulers and the people in Asia. And some of the rulers include like King Ashoka, we'll talk about him, together with the people of Asia. The people of Asia found Buddhism to be something suitable for them. Then there is also a symbiotic relationship between the merchants and the Buddhist community. So Buddhism spread together by trade, along the trade routes, by merchants. And some references you can have a look at will be Coin and Prabish. This is the Encyclopedia of Buddhism. And another book is Skilton, A Concise History of Buddhism. But there are many sources that you can get information on the spread of Buddhism. Now, the transmission of Buddhism was complex because the Buddha's teachings, the scriptures, the images started appearing along the major trade routes and carried by traveling monks and merchants. So later on, I will explain to you how the trade routes open up. And sometimes the monks goes along with the merchants, when the merchants come back and the monks say, oh, they've gone to such and such a place, and there are a community of people who might be very keen to study the Dhamma. And the monk says, can I go along with you in the next time when you go to that region? And so the monks travel together with the merchants. Now, the transmission outside South Asia was not something systematic or organized. Actually, the process is quite complex. And it's not necessarily in one direction. Sometimes it's from India going to China, sometimes from China back to India. And different schools and doctrines of Buddhism coexisted and mingled with one another. So the process is quite complex. Now, the thing about Buddhism is that it spread peacefully without the use of war. In a very peaceful manner through the centuries, it spread to South Asia, and then to Central Asia, to China, to the rest of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and later on to Tibet, and also in various parts of Central Asia. It developed in these regions in an organic fashion. There's no violence, no bloodshed. It spread because of the local interest in Buddhist beliefs. And sometimes the rulers themselves adopted Buddhism because they think that it will bring good ethics to the people. It makes them more civilized. And so no one was forced to convert in Buddhism. One of the major contributions for the spread of Buddhism was the contribution of Emperor Ashoka. Emperor Ashoka was a ferocious warrior. He took over the throne after the father died, and he was really interested in expanding his territory. But however, when he fought a war at Kalinga, about 250,000 people were killed. Many people were made homeless, and the devastation was so terrible that Ashoka, for the first time, as if the eye has opened up, his eye opened up, and he saw the kind of suffering that he brought to the people because of his desire to conquer, right? So what happened was that he later on became a Buddhist, and a very devout Buddhist. He sent missionaries right across to different lands. The second contribution was by King Kanishka during the Kushan dynasty. And for the people who follows the Theravada school of Buddhism, I think many of them do not know anything about King Kanishka. So I'll mention about King Kanishka. And the 5th and 6th century, CE means the Common Era. It's an important watershed for Buddhism because Buddhism, by the 5th to 6th century, Buddhism spread to the Indian subcontinent as well as to China. that was before the 5th to 6th century, right? It's about 1,000 years, the first 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away. So Buddhism had already spread to China. But after the 5th century, Buddhism started making a very strong presence in our part of the world, in Sumatra, in Japan, in Korea. And so there were new networks of Buddhist exchanges. By the time you come to the 10th century, the Buddhists will span across Central Asia to Japan with multiple centers of Buddhism. And so there are expansion of Buddhism. So the 10th century is an important watershed. Now, let us now talk about the Silk Road. In order to get a more detailed version of this part of the spread of Buddhism, please refer to my talk. I've given this talk at BGF. It appears on YouTube. It is called Spread of Buddhism Along the Silk Road. So you can check out on this talk. Now, the first is about Greco-Buddhism. You might be surprised that Alexander the Great actually had an influence on the spread of Buddhism. You see, Alexander the Great as a kind of a young warrior, even in his teens and early 20s, he managed to conquer Persia, Asia Minor, Egypt, and all that. And when he conquered Persia, the King Darius ran away. He fought a battle 3 times with King Darius. 3 times King Darius lost the war. And King Darius ran to Central Asia, which is part of the Persian Empire. And Alexander the Great was very keen to meet King Darius. And so he started pursuing King Darius and went into Central Asia. Okay, so from Central Asia, after going to Central Asia, he spent a couple of years trying to put down rebellions. And from Central Asia, he started moving onwards to India. By which time, I think some of the warriors, some of the people in his army, they got tired because they've already spent about 10 years fighting battles after battles. And they are paid very well because these are rich countries that Alexander the Great managed to get hold of the treasury. So then they told Alexander the Great, no, we are not keen to go on and fight some more. We like to settle here. And so they settled in Central Asia, like in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Central Asia. And later on, their descendants became early Buddhists. So these Greeks became very attracted to Buddhism. And they are called Greco-Buddhists. Greco means Greek, they're Greek Buddhists. So Greco-Buddhism is a cultural syncretism. This means it's a kind of a blend within the Hellenistic culture, which is the Greek culture, and Buddhism. And this lasted over 800 years in Central Asia, between, from the 4th century before the Common Era to the 5th century Common Era. So about 800 years. There was this cultural blending between the Greek culture and Buddhism. So some of the later development in Buddhism contains elements of Greco-Buddhist. And one of the contributions of the Greco-Buddhists was that they developed sculptures of the Buddha and influenced the development of Buddhism, especially in Mahayana Buddhism. Now, this sculpture that you see on the screen is a beautiful sculpture. This is, for example, example of a Greco-Buddhist style. And this was carved in the Gandhara area between the 1st to the 2nd century Common Era. You see, they have beautiful sculptures. Actually, before the Greeks became Buddhist, there were no statues of the Buddha at all. The Buddha was like represented by the wheel, or the Bodhi tray, So, but the Greeks are used to having their gods appear in human form. So because they don't have any examples of how the Buddha looked like, they make use of the god Apollo as a model for the Buddha. So you find the early sculptures of the Buddha done by the Greeks has a very noble Grecian look. And Buddhism prospered under Indo-Greek kings. And so the Greeks, during the time of Emperor Ashoka, also took an active role in spreading Buddhism. So they became monks and they also spread Buddhism. But this is the empire of Ashoka. And you could see after the conversion to Buddhism, Ashoka brought Buddhism out of India because he sent missionaries throughout his vast empire, as well as to places which are not part of his empire, say, for instance, like Sri Lanka. He sent missionaries to Kashmir, to Gandhara, which is in Pakistan, Afghanistan area, as well as to Southeast Asia, such as Myanmar, as well as to the west, to Greece, Egypt, Syria, Macedonia. And in fact, in the Greek itself, there were some records of some Buddhist temples, some Buddhist monasteries in Egypt. Now, his son, by the name of Mahinda, converted the king of Sri Lanka by the name of King Tisha. And he brought the Staviravada school of Buddhism to Sri Lanka. Staviravada is Sanskrit. In Pali, it is called Theravada. So the Theravada tradition of Buddhism was brought by Arahan Mahinda, who is the son of King Ashoka, down to Sri Lanka. So many young nobles in Sri Lanka got converted after the king became a Buddhist, and because of that, the country became Buddhist also. And some of the princes and the noble people were converted. They ordained as monks, right? Later on, the women also wanted to become nuns. So Arhan Mahinda is joined by his sister by the name of Shangamita, who brought a Bodhi tree to the capital city, Anuradhapura. And together, they also started the Order of Nuns for Sri Lanka. Now, during that time, there was another early Buddhist school, which is called Savastivada. It's an early Buddhist school. But this school is not somewhat strongly supported by Ashoka. What happened was that they actually moved to Kashmir, to the northwest part of India, and prospered in Kashmir in the Gandhara area. And this school actually became very influential. It remained very influential for another 10 centuries. And this was a school that actually influenced the development of Buddhism in Central Asia and also found its way along the Silk Road and into China. So this Savastivada school of Buddhism has also influenced very much the development of Mahayana Buddhism. Now, let us talk about the Silk Road. How was the Silk Road opened up? Okay. Now, we begin by talking from the China side, because it was the Chinese that opened up the Silk Road. The Han Empire. I just want to check, when I move the cursor, can you see me moving the cursor here on my screen? Can you see the cursor?
Can. We can see.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So you see, this is the Chinese Han Empire, but the Han Empire was actually isolated, because after this civilization, as you move westwards, you'll come to the deserts, and the deserts stretch for thousands of kilometers, right? Before you reach the mountains, and there's a ring of snow-capped mountains that surrounds China. In the south will be Tibet, and then as you move, then you have the Pamir Mountains, and then you have the Tian Shan Mountains. So China is actually kind of isolated. Now, the problem that China was facing during the Han Empire was that they had attacks from the Xiongnu people. The Xiongnu are really horsemen, nomadic horsemen, and when the weather was very cold, a lot of the animals die. They gang up together and they will attack China. And I think that is because of that the Great Wall was actually built. So they had a lot of attack from the Xiongnu. Now, also during the time of the Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, he wanted to get reinforcement from this group of nomadic people also. They're called the Yuezhi group. Okay, the Yuezhi group. The Yuezhi group was in the Hersey corridor. They were staying down there, but they were being chased away by the Xiongnu. Xiongnu attacked them, and so they have to start running, and they have to, and they started moving westwards until eventually they reached to Central Asia, the current day Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Okay, so they settled down there. So during that time, the Emperor Wu thinks that, oh, you know, the Yuezhi has been attacked by the Xiongnu. Surely we can get their cooperation to gang up together so that we can fight with the Xiongnu. So he had a volunteer by the name of Chang Qian from the court. And Chang Qian set out from Chang'an, which was the capital of China at that time, with 100 soldiers. And so they moved westwards in order to contact the Yuezhi tribe, in order to get allies to fight the very fierce Xiongnu nomadic tribe. But in order to get over to Yuezhi, he doesn't know where Yuezhi is. He only knows westward. So he started moving west, and he went into the Xiongnu territory. And because he was there, he was being attacked and was imprisoned by the Xiongnu for 10 years. But I think Chang Qian was he was a diplomatic person, very pleasant personality, and basically people like him. So he was not killed, or he was not made a slave. Actually, he even had a wife, a Xiongnu wife, and a son. And so he was with the Xiongnu for 10 years. But when the occasion came, 10 years later, he managed to escape. So he went further westwards to the Tarim Basin, where the rim of the Taklamakan Desert, and continue moving until crossing the snow mountains until he reached the Yuezhi tribe. And there the Yuezhi tribe has now settled in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. And the land is so fertile. So instead of a desert area, it is all fertile. And they are prosperous. They're so happy that they do not want to fight the Xiongnu anymore. They say, we are actually happy where we are. That's why you have jade, you have agriculture products like the grapes. And from grapes, they were able to make wines. They got beautiful fruits and melons and things like that. You know, so it was flourishing. But also, Chang Qian also noticed that in this land, they had very powerful and magnificent horses. This is what they call heavenly horses, which later on they managed to import into China in order to strengthen their cavalry with these horses from Central Asia. Because the Yuezhi turned down his offer, he remained for 1 year just going around that area, mapping up what he saw. And then he decided to go back again to the Han Empire, and on his way back, he was caught again by the Xiongnu, and he managed to escape again. And when he returned to the Han court with the maps they have, very detailed maps, now the Han Empire were able to fight wars with the Xiongnu and were able to chase them out. So this is, for instance, okay. Now, if you see my cursor here, that is the part of the Han Empire. Now, in order for you to get to the Silk Road, you need to go to the Hersey corridor. Hersey means He is Huanghe, which is the river, great river, Yellow River. Sea is the west. So this is the corridor to the west of River Huanghe. And this corridor in the south will be snow-peaked mountains. So it is not possible for you to move south. And on the north will be the Gobi Desert. So this is actually a very narrow corridor for you to move in order to land up to the Taklamakan Desert. And this area is under the control of the Xiongnu. So because of the maps and all that, and at that time, there was a Han general, a young man also like Alexander the Great, or Hua Jiuping, who managed to fight battles with the Xiongnu and defeated them. And because of that, the Chinese Empire established, these are all like watchtowers, which later on grew into cities. So now you have the city of Wuwei, Changye, Sichuan, and Donghuang. Okay, so and because the Chinese had now control over the Hersey corridor, it is now possible to penetrate right through. And as you move this way westwards, you will see the Taklamakan Desert. Now, Taklamakan Desert is like a kind of a bowl. It's a very dry desert with moving sand, shifting sand. But along the rim of this desert, you can have cities because there is water being fed from the melting snow, from the snow mountains. The water goes underground and come out in these cities. So they become oasis cities. And it is therefore possible for you to travel along the route. You can either travel on the northern Silk Road or the southern Silk Road, and then you meet together again at Kashgar. So this is the Taklamakan that is big enough for us to put the entire Malaysia inside. All right. So because of this discovery, now it is possible the Silk Road is open, and it's possible for China to get its goods out to Central Asia, and from Central Asia it goes to the other parts of the civilized world at that time, to the Mediterranean, to the Arab country, to Persia and all that, and also to India. Okay, so the Silk Road served as a conduit for the exchange of knowledge, for technology, for culture, and precious goods from China, India, Middle East, and the Mediterranean. So these are the big civilizations. And at that time, the main traders are the Sogdian traders. Sogdian comes from the Central Asia. They were from the Samarkand, and they are able to speak many languages. They are the people who actually travel along the Silk Road to China. It's not so much the Chinese traveling along the Silk Road. It's the Sogdian traders, people from Central Asia, traveling along the Silk Road to China. And the terminal point is Xi'an. So they settle down in Xi'an, some of them. And they travel along this route. So once the goods are being brought to Central Asia, it is possible for these goods now to go down to India, as well as to go westwards into Europe, into Turkey and all that, okay? So by the 5th century before the Common Era, the ocean trade routes was actually opened up. So this connected Rome with India. And once China has opened up the Silk Road, now from India, you can actually connect through China. But of course, you have the barrier. These are the mountain ranges and all that. And there are only certain places that you can penetrate through these mountains. And this is called pass. You go through the mountain pass in order to get through the other side. And of course, one of the most precious things that China has, which is extremely valuable, with silk. But it is not just confined to silk, but silk is one of those things. It's traded like currency. You can pay soldiers by bundles of silk also. So Buddhism originated from India in the 5th century before the Common Era, but it spread rapidly to influence the world culture through this network of the Silk Road through Asia. And between the 1st century before the Common Era to the 7th century Common Era, different strands of Buddhism travel along the Silk Road from India, along the trade route to Central Asia and to China. Another great king is the Kanishka of the Kushan Empire. Now, he came much later than Ashoka. It's like about 400 or 500 years later. And now, because the Silk Road has been opened up and trade between China and the West is possible, so business prospered along the Silk Road. Now, Kanishka the Great of the Kushan Empire, he's the tribe. He came from the tribe of the Yuezhi people who actually originated from China, but he landed up close to North India, to Pakistan. Okay, and he became the great king there. His empire was a Kushan empire, and he expanded his empire to cover the oasis cities. So he crosses the mountains to the oasis cities of the Tarim Basin. And during his reign, it was safe for anybody to travel along the Silk Road. Because the traders are normally attacked by robbers. But during his time, during Kanishka's time, it was actually safe for travel. So actually trade really prospered. And it was during this time that Buddhism was able to move along the Silk Road into China, okay, during the time of King Kanishka of the Kushan Empire. And he was also the patron for the 4th Buddhist Council in Kashmir. So they had the 4th Buddhist Council in Kashmir, and he also encouraged the Gandhara School of Art. So Gandhara School of Art prospered under his time. And so the Kushans dominated the Indian Kush. They were centered around Gandhara. Gandhara is now in northern Pakistan. And also they control northwestern India. They control the trade between India and China. Parthia was the old name for Iran and the Roman Empire. And Buddhism expanded right up to Merv, Merv is currently in the city called Mary, and this is old Persia in Persia. So Buddhism has even gone to Iran, and according to the Chinese records, some of these Iranians became monks, and they actually traveled to China to bring the Dharma, and also were involved in translation of the Buddhist texts into Chinese. So we must pay our gratitude to the Iranian Buddhist monks. One of them is called Anshikal, another one is called Answan, from Persia, from Iran. And Bactria was also introduced to Buddhism in the first century's Common Era, and Buddhism expanded in central Afghanistan. So Afghanistan also had very important center of learning of Buddhism. And here, this is statue before it was destroyed by the Taliban. This is the Bamiyan Buddha. It is about 180 feet tall. And then there was another smaller one, a smaller standing Buddha also. Both was being destroyed by the Taliban. This was carved out of sandstone, carved out from the mountains. So they had to bring ammunition in order to blast out the Bamiyan Buddhas, which is very sad. Because Bamiyan in Afghanistan is actually a crossroads where the trade routes meet, and the valley itself is very fertile. And the local people have actually appreciated very much this statue, because they thought that this statue brought them blessings. Even they are no longer Buddhist. But the Taliban's coming from a different place decided to blow up the Bamiyan Buddhas, and so it is completely lost now. So I was mentioning that there's the early school of Buddhism called Sarvastivadin, which moved northwest of India, and the influence grew into Central Asia under the patronage of Kushan kings. Their works are in Sanskrit, including many Abhidhamma texts. So that is why Sanskrit was pretty much being used in the northern school of Buddhism, because of the influence of Sarvastivadin. Sarvastivadin later on broke into many schools also. So they were actually making use of Sanskrit. And so there was a lot of great innovations occurring in Central Asia, northwest India, intermingling of early Buddhism and Mahayana. Mahayana developed in Kashmir and in Central Asia. And under the guidance of the Sarvastivadin teachers in Central Asia, they developed meditation practices, including meditation of the Buddhas and the recollection of the Buddhas, also meditation of the next Buddha, which is Maitreya Buddha. This is very popular. And later on, the meditation of Amitabha Buddha and Pure Land. So this was really very active in Central Asia and in northwest India. As part of the Sarvastivadin tradition, Dharmagupta is another splinter group. So the Dharmagupta monks did a lot of missionary work along the Sea Road. So they actually brought the Dharma to China. And in fact, the Dharmagupta Vinaya itself is being observed by the Chinese monks. So they are all from the same root. So you could see that with the expansion of the Kushan Empire, you see this Gandhara. This is the capital of Kanishka, and that's Bamiyan. And then this is one mountain pass. You pass through Kashgar and Kazil. This is the Seri, and then you meet at Tonghuang. And from Tonghuang, as you move eastward, you reach to China. There's another one from Kashgar. You can also move along the southern Silk Road. It meets again at Tonghuang, and then from there you go over to China. Okay. So Buddhism, the oasis cities flourish because there was a lot of trade, and when you pass through these oasis cities, you have to pay a lot of taxes. So the cities were flourishing because trade was very active trading occurring along the Silk Road. And so Central Asia was one of the main routes for the transmission of Buddhism from China to China in the 1st century Common Era, and also to Tibet in the 7th century. So Central Asia was very important. The merchants were the Sogdian merchants, established settlements along the route. They also learn languages. They are very talented in languages. And later on, they also contributed in the translation of Buddhist texts, including into Chinese. And these are the people living around a place called Samarkand. So one of these days, when you go to Uzbekistan, when you look at the people, you say, oh, these are the sovereign people that had been responsible in the past to bring Buddhism to China. So there are also oasis kingdoms in the Tarim Basin. For instance, Khotan. Khotan is in the southern Sea Road. In Kocha, in Tufan, these are all important Buddhist centers. Before later on, they were converted into Islam. Now, according to the Chinese pilgrims, the kingdom on the northern Silk Road followed the early Buddhism, the Sarvastivadin school of Buddhism. In the southern Silk Road, they tend to be practitioners of the Mahayana Buddhism tradition. And so later on, Buddhism disappeared. By the time you come to the first 1,000 years Common Era, Buddhism disappeared in Central Asia. So this is a place they planted Buddhism. It grew for about 1,000 years, and after that, it disappeared because this region succumbed to Muslim invaders between the 8th to the 14th century. And even like Khotan, which is a very important center for Mahayana learning, in 9550, it was being invaded, and the whole Buddhist kingdom disappeared because the rulers embraced Islam, and everybody was converted into Islam. In the northern Sea Road, Buddhism survived for a few more centuries under the end of the 15th century, and then they also disappeared. So this is when you have the Uyghurs. Uyghurs in the early Uyghurs were Buddhist, and they were also responsible for some beautiful paintings in the caves along the Silk Road before they were converted into Islam. Now, the spread of Buddhism to China. So Buddhism transmitted from northwest India, then went to Pakistan, went to Afghanistan, went to Central Asia, went to Xinjiang, and then landed up in China. And the Buddhism from China went to Korea, and from Korea to Japan. Okay, so it entered China along the through the Silk Road in the 1st or the 2nd century Common Era, and it is the Buddhist monks from the Gandhara region that played a key role in the development and transmission of Buddhist ideas. All right, so the Chinese teachers, the teachers of the Chinese monks, if you trace back, the teachers came from Pakistan and Afghanistan or Iran. These are the teachers, from one teacher to another teacher, another teacher. If you trace back, the teachers are Central Asians. Okay, so the Central Asian monks and the East Asian monks continue to have these interactions for many centuries. And here you can see the cave painting. The Central Asian monk had blue eyes, teaching the East Asian monk, which has got the Chinese face. And this is from the Basilic Thousand Buddha caves from Tufan. It's Oasis City. Yeah. This painting is already gone. I think it'll probably this painting is now in the museum because the Western people, they excavated some of these things and they cut out the paintings and shipped them back to their museum. But maybe it is a good thing that we can see the painting so beautiful, because if now you go over to Bezaklik Caves, you find a place, the eyes have been dug up and the whole painting had been destroyed actually. So in a sense, it's brought back to the West in the museum. So we go to a museum, we can get very beautiful paintings like this. So the early translation of Buddhist scriptures into Chinese, this was done in the 2nd century. First, the Central Asian monks traveled along the Silk Road. The local community, Buddhist communities, were also not Chinese. They were also from Central Asians. And so the monks comes along, they do the puja and all that, and they also want teaching, so the monks started teaching. And later on, the Chinese begin to get interested in the Dhamma. And this is when they say, can you please also translate the scriptures into Chinese? And so according to the Chinese records, there are about 37 recorded names of Buddhist monks who are not Chinese. They are from Central Asia. For instance, Anshikao, Lokak Sharma, Kumarajiva, the great translator, and of course Bodhidharma is from India, who brought Zen over to or Chan Buddhism to China. Okay. Now the early the concepts, Buddhist concepts, are actually quite different from Chinese concepts. So when they started translating the Buddhist scriptures from Sanskrit into Chinese, they don't even have the terms to express ideas. Sometimes they use the Sanskrit term itself, like poti, right? So this actually come from Sanskrit words. But sometimes if Taoism, for instance, is originally from China, there are some concepts from Taoism, some terms that could actually be used. So they were using actually terms from the Taoist teachings in order to translate the Buddhist scriptures. So much so that over time people get confused. They think that, oh, this Buddhism is just a kind of it is some kind of a plagiarism of Taoism. Until later on, you have a great translator like Kumarajiva, who's able to translate it so well that Buddhism actually begin to live in the Chinese language. Okay. Now, Anshika was a Parthian prince. Parthia is current day Iran, and he settled in the Han capital of Laoyang. Laoyang is the capital, and he translated Indian Buddhist scriptures, actually the Savastivada text, into or meditation on Abhidharma Buddhist doctrine into Chinese. There's another Kushan, a monk. Kushan comes from the Kushan Empire. Lokaksema, he was the first translator of the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures into Chinese, and again in the city of Loyang, which was the capital of China. Right? And then, starting from the 4th century onwards, Chinese monks started using the Silk Road, passing through Central Asia, going to India in order to get the original scriptures. So there are pilgrimages by Fa Xian, Xuanzang, and Yi Ching. And actually, I do have a talk on this one. It's very interesting to see the journey and the pilgrimages that's made by Fa Xian, Xuanzang, and Yi Ching. Fa Xian went to India when he was about 60 years old. And he traveled by foot through the Silk Road to land up in India and came back at the age of 70. It's fantastic. But he doesn't have any luck with the ship, because every time he got into the ship will be blown off course. And Xuanzang, of course, the story of Xuanzang is quite remarkable. And after Xuanzang was Yi Ching. But Yi Ching could not travel overland, Silk Road, because of trouble. The countries are having trouble, so he had to go by sea. And because of that, he made a very good record of the Buddhism that is practiced in our part of the world, in Southeast Asia. Okay, so first Buddhism was imported from India into China. And by the time you come to the 6th century, about 2,000 Buddhist texts was translated and cataloged. They're already building a good body of text. And then, of course, monks like Fa Xian and Xuanzang and Yi Ching returned back with Buddhist scriptures that was translated into Chinese. And Buddhism really expanded during the Tang Dynasty. But towards the end of the Tang Dynasty, there was persecution of Buddhism. And so some schools of Buddhism actually died during this persecution, leaving the Pure Land and Chan Buddhism remaining. But it's a good thing that some of the schools in Buddhism was actually transferred to Japan before they died. Okay, so it's... Now, when we talk about Chinese Buddhism was actually broken into two segments. During the Hun's invasion, about 320, China was broken into two parts, right? So the Chinese courts fled down, they escaped, they moved down to the southern part of China and remained there until the 6th century, until the country got united again. Now, the northern rulers were not Han Chinese. So they were almost like foreign dynasties, but they supported Buddhism and they were able to get Buddhist translation from Indian source. And therefore, Indian Buddhism became influential in the northern region of China. In the southern part of China, they were cut off from India and from Central Asia. And so the Chinese Buddhists started developing the Buddhist doctrines that is integrated with Chinese ideas and Chinese ideals. And at that time, Bodhidharma also came to South China and founded a school, the Chan School. So here you have northern China and southern China being broken into two, and you also develop Chinese Buddhism in the south. The northern Buddhism tends to have Indian schools, Indian Buddhist schools. So the northern and southern part of China were united again under the Sui dynasty and under the Tang dynasty between the 6th to the 10th century. And so Central Asia became a corridor again, link up to India. So pilgrims were able to make use of these corridors, and teachers were able to travel both ways. So some of the Indian schools that were in China, the Three Treaties School. This was a school founded by Kumarajiva, the great translator. Yogacharan School. This is founded by Xuanzang. So he went to India because he was very interested in the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, whole compendium of meditation. So he was a meditator. He was very keen in that. So this school was established, founded by Xuanzang. You have the Abhidhamma Kosha, that's based on the Sarvastivadin's Abhidhamma. So you have Indian school also on Abhidhamma. You have the disciplinary school. This is founded on Vinaya school, okay, by Tao Xuan in the 7th century. And you also have the esoteric Buddhism of Michong. This was being brought by Indian monks came to China, Vajrabodhi and Amoga Vajra, and introduced esoteric Buddhism or Tantric Buddhism to the Chinese. In the southern schools, Chinese schools, you had the Tentai schools. This is based on the Lotus Sutra. The Huayan school, based on the Avatamsaka Sutta. Then you got the Chan school, founded by Bodhidharma. You got the Pure Land, which is based on Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra. And then you got the Tantric Tibetan Buddhism. This was introduced during the Mongol rule. But during the persecution of Buddhism, these schools disappeared. The two schools that remain will be the Chan Buddhism as well as Pure Land. So the other schools actually disappeared. But the ideas got integrated in some of these remaining schools. So from China, Buddhism was brought to Korea in the 4th century, that means 300 something. Buddhist monks from China went to, at that time, Korea, they got 3 kingdoms. You got a Kogaryu and Pakye. So these 2 kingdoms adopted Buddhism early, yeah? And they were adopted by the royalty. And then 200 years later, the Silla kingdom officially accepted Buddhism. So by the 6th century, the whole Korea became Buddhist. Yeah? And then, because they became Buddhist, some of the Korean monks also went to China to study Buddhism. And sometimes some of who are more ambitious, they even went all the way to India. And they also did some pilgrimage also to India, Korean monks, in order to bring back Buddhism. So Buddhism flourished in Korea when Korea was united under the Silla rulers and up to the Koryo dynasty. But from the 14th to the 20th century, Confucianism became very strong, and Buddhist activities was banished from the cities. So they were being pushed out to the mountains. And that is why the Korean monasteries are in the mountains, out of the cities. And because they are out in the mountains, they spend a lot of time more like meditation. They're not in the cities, being pushed out because of the confusion. And later on, of course, when the Americans came, Christianity came and became very influential in Korea. Okay, so this is the history of Korea. How about Japan? Japan got introduced to Buddhism because of the Koreans. So the king of Pakye presented to the emperor of Japan some Buddhist scriptures and Buddha image, and they actually like it. But in Japan, there were contending clans. They had a big debate. Do you want to accept a foreign religion like Buddhism, or because we already have Shintoism? But later on, the argument saying that Buddhism will refine the Japanese. That one won argument, and therefore because of that, they adopted Buddhism in Japan. And especially under Prince Regent Shotoku, he actually declared Buddhism as the official religion of Japan, and Buddhism flourished in the capital at Nara. So the capital was Nara, but when Buddhism became too strong, they had to move the capital to Kyoto because the monks' monastery became too powerful. Even Kyoto also, you have many monasteries from there. And later on, they moved over to Tokyo, the capital. So in Japan, they were based on the Indian schools. There were 6 Indian schools imported from China, and they also brought in Chinese form of Buddhism. So Japan had both the Indian schools and the Chinese schools. And but unfortunately, in the case of Japan, especially during the Meiji Restoration, they decided that Shinto should be adopted as the official religion, and the practice of Buddhism was prohibited. So, practice of Buddhism was very much constrained. Okay, and so that is a position of Buddhism in the China and Korea as well as Japan. Okay, so Sea Road. When we talk about the maritime Asia, it spreads across South Asia, which is India, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, that's our part of the world, as well as East Asia. All right, and this is also known as Monsoon Asia, because this area between India and China, we are under the influence of the monsoons. We have the northeast monsoon during the winter seasons of the northern hemisphere, and the southwest monsoon during the summer months. So at the center will be the mainland as well as peninsular Southeast Asia, as well as the Malay Indonesian archipelago. All right. So we are really at the center, Southeast Asia. And there was, because of this trade that is passing through, you have the circulation of people, of goods, of languages, of ideas along the Silk Road. And this was intensified by the mid-7th century with the expansion of the commercial maritime routes between South and East Asia. So especially with the expansion of trade between China, within the Middle East and India, our part of the world really prospered. There is a very good reference by Tan Sen Sen on the spread of Buddhism. Okay. Now, from the 3rd century before the Common Era, the monastic community was linked to the trading network in the Indian subcontinent, and we talk about how following the trade routes, that's how monasteries are established, and so the Buddhist sites were located near the urban centers along the trade route. In the case of Mahayana Buddhism, it started about 200 before Common Era. It was popular in Central Asia, and later on to China, Japan, and Korea. In the case of Theravada Buddhism is a form of early Buddhism, but it germinated only in southern India and Sri Lanka. And it developed between the 3rd century before Common Era to the 5th century Common Era. So Theravada Buddhism was practiced in Myanmar before it started moving to Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos and beyond. Yeah. So Theravada Buddhism was really the southern school of Buddhism, because Theravada Buddhism, Pali, was not being used in the northern school of Buddhism. That's why when the Chinese monks came over to India, they only took back Sanskrit scriptures, because the scriptures had to be carried by animals. So they don't have, they're not able to get a whole cargo container. If they have a container, they'll take all the scriptures everywhere. But because they had to be carried by the animals, so they take something that is completely, really just relevant to their tradition, which is really from the Sanskrit scriptures. So some people are saying, hey, how come these monks are Fa Xian, Xuanzang, and Yiqing only brought back Sanskrit and not Pali? No, Pali was actually in southern school. The schools that had influenced China were really from the northern school of Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism developed in the 7th century and was later on incorporated into local Buddhist beliefs and practices. Of course, Tantric Buddhism now is very popular. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you have time, then you can actually have a look at the map on the spread of Buddhism. But later on, at the end of this talk, I will play you a short video that will integrate everything. Then you begin to see across time how Buddhism started spreading in various areas and how it disappeared in various areas also. This might be a bit detailed, but if you get a copy of this PowerPoint, then you can actually spend your time. A lot of old names, even the, like Sri Vijaya and all that. Buddhism between the 5th to the 10th century. Between the 5th to the 10th century, there were strong networks of exchange of Buddhist monks, of merchants, of religious texts and articles between India and China. So between the 5th and 6th century, suddenly the interaction between India and China became very strong. And there were strong exchanges of Buddhist monks and merchants. So monks from India travel along the sea to China, and monks from China travel by sea to India. And so there was a lot of strong exchanges. And because of that, because we are at the crossroads, that is why Buddhism started picking up in Southeast Asia. And also by the time you come to the 7th century, Korea and Japan also joined this network. So can you see this kind of maritime network? China, India, Korea, and Japan. And then because they go by the trade winds, and the trade winds meet in Southeast Asia, because you can actually wait in Malaysia to wait for the monsoon to change for you to get back. Okay, so we were the beneficiaries because of the monsoon, and because there was very activity between China and India. So if you want to look at our history, what really happened in Indonesia, in the Malay Peninsula, it is during this time that you have a lot of Buddhist activities. So here you have India, and here you have China, right? And I mentioned to you that China is actually broken into two at that time. You got the Northern Way, where they are the non-Han rulers, almost you could say like foreigner rulers, and the Liang dynasty. This is the southern. This is where the emperor went down to the south and established in the south. So the Liang dynasty, and actually during the Liang dynasty, they were the ones who were very active in linking up with India. The Northern Way used Central Asia because it's easier for them to get to India using Central Asia. So that's why they're getting a very good stream of Indian teachers and all that. And so the Indian schools, the Indian schools in China was strong because of this link. But in the southern school, they were not linked to Central Asia. So they had to go through Southeast Asia, through the sea. Yeah. The Liang dynasty, because there was one emperor that was very active for his missionary work. He wanted to get a lot of teachers from India. So then Southeast Asia lies in between. So in India, you have the emergence of Nalanda Mahavihara during this time, 5th and 6th century. And in China, Japan, Korea, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, you have new kingdoms. For instance, under the Liang dynasty in South China, they were the ones who were propagating Buddhism within the kingdom and establishing active connections with the Buddhist centers in India. And also, because we are in between, also in Southeast Asia and in Korea. The Northern Way is in the northern part of China, right? So they use the Central Asia. Also, during the second half of the 7th to 8th century, this was when the tantric tradition that was actually from India started creeping into Buddhism and started influencing Buddhist doctrines. And so that's how tantric Buddhism begin to get established and spread. And later on, they became influential. In fact, even Nalanda itself became a center for tantric Buddhism, very much supported by the Pala kings. So tantric Buddhism, which was the local Indian beliefs and practice, got integrated in Buddhism, and then they begin to expand, which is being favored by the kings, especially in Bihar, in Bengal area. And also they were being favored by the Tang emperors themselves. Yeah. So they influenced the monastic institutions. Sri Lanka at one time have a tantric tradition, Southeast Asia, in Korea and Japan. So the tantric masters were linked with the Tang courts, and they were the Indian monks. Indian monks came with the tantric tradition, and they trained the Chinese monks as well as the South Asian monks. They also trained, like Kukai was from Japan. He went back to Japan and established the tantric tradition, the Shingon tradition in Japan. He was being trained by the Indian masters. And you have another one called Bian Hong from Java, who was trained, and Bian Hong helped in the design of the Borobudur. And Tantric Buddhism came into Tibet during the 8th century. Okay. Now let us talk about Buddhism in Tibet. Buddhism was introduced in Tibet during the time of the king Songtsen Gampo. Songtsen Gampo was a very ambitious king, and he expanded, he united Tibet and expanded the empire of Tibet. So he was a very powerful king. And because he was powerful, in order to make peace with him, the Chinese emperor had to send a princess to be married to him. That is what China has to do. You got to send Chinese princes to be married to the Xiongnu leaders in order that they don't attack China, and send a princess, Wen-Chen, to be the wife of to be married to King Songtsen Gampo. But Songtsen Gampo was also very influential. He also had a wife from Nepal, also a Nepalese princess. And the good thing about his two wives, both of them are Buddhist. So because of two wives, for Buddhist, also influenced the husband. The husband also became Buddhist. He was the one who built the Potala Palace, Songtsen Gampo. He became a Buddhist. But at that time, the practice in Tibet was born practices, native practices. So Buddhism did not really spread very much. But 1 century later, Buddhism began to take root in the Tibetan society under the reign of King Trisong Datsun. Yeah. I actually had some problem trying to remember the name. For Songtsen, I think something like sing a song, Songtsen. And Trisong Datsun, I think is Datsun with 3 songs, Trisong Datsun. So that's how I try to remember these names. Now, King Trisong Datsun actually wanted to get some scholarship from Nalanda. Nalanda was a very famous Mahavihara at that time. So they wanted to bring some guru from Nalanda. And his name was Santa Rakshita. But Santa Rakshita was a scholar monk. And he found that he was not able to touch the lives of the local Tibetans because they're not keen to listen to all the scholarship and all that. So Santa Rakshita advised King Trisong Datsun, why don't you invite Guru Padmasambhava, who is actually supposed to come from Pakistan, to bring Buddhism into Tibet. Now, Guru Padmasambhava has also mastered the tantric arts. So when he went over to Tibet, he was able to tame the demons actually in Tibet, and was able to reach out and influence the Tibetans. So that's how Tibet became Buddhist under the power of Padmasambhava. But again, with Santa Rakshita was a scholarship, Padmasambhava with the tantric traditions also a master. When they combine together, it really helps to boost Buddhism in Tibet. And the thing about Tibet is because at one time, Tibet was influenced both by the Chinese tradition and the Indian tradition. But they had a big debate that ran for 3 days at the Samye Monastery. So you see a picture of Samye Monastery. The Chinese tradition was a Chan, Southern Enlightenment. The Indian school was Gradual Enlightenment. So eventually the Indian scholar, one of the students of Santa Rakshita, actually prevailed in the debate. So he won the debate. And because of that, Tibet started looking to Nalanda and no longer towards China, towards the Zen tradition. And because they were linked up with Nalanda, and Vikramashila is also another Mahavihara, another famous university. Because this is a university level, the Buddhist doctrines through all the sutras, so diverse sutras, it becomes so hard to put them together. That is why in China they decided just to concentrate on one sutra itself. Because to try to integrate all sutras, you need scholarship. And in southern China, they don't have like a university to help them do that. But in the case of Tibetan Buddhism, they had this Nalanda and Vikramashila to synthesize all the earlier doctrines and practices, reconcile all the differences, and put it in a universal system that links up with Dhamma Vinaya. So actually, the Tibetan tradition tries to tie up everything because they have the advantages of the university to do this for them. So Tibetan Buddhists have preserved the unbroken traditions of the monastic universities of Northern. So some of these practices of Nalanda and all was being established. So in Tibet itself, we have monastery universities. And so the scholarship and the practice in Tibet was very well established. And later on, when the Tibet became really part of China, right? When the Dalai Lama moved over to India, some of these monastery universities established in India. So in India now they have, for instance, the Ganden monastery, the Seri monastery. This was something that's developed in India based on what was available in Tibet. Then now let's just move on to the 1000 to 1500 Common Era. The 11th century, the Buddhist world is divided into 3 different worlds. One is the Indian Tibet world. Indian Tibet world was largely on the Tantric tradition. East Asian world on Mahayana Buddhism, and Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia on Theravada. The contacts and exchanges continued to exist between these 3 different schools. However, it is interesting to note that Atisha, who is a very famous teacher from India, who later on went to Tibet to re-energize Buddhism in Tibet, he actually traveled all the way to Sumatra in early 11th century because there was a famous master in Sumatra by the name of Dhammakriti. And Atisha spent 11 years studying under this teacher in Sumatra before he returned back to India to Vikramashila University, monastery. And then later on, he was invited to Tibet to teach Tantric Buddhism. So at that time in Sumatra, there are many famous teachers and also equivalent to centers of learning. Yeah, in fact, he says that actually before you go over to Nalanda University, Chinese monks should spend some time in Sumatra, in Palembang and in Srivijaya, to study Buddhism and to learn Sanskrit before going over to India. So if Sumatra had not changed their religion, you probably go to Sumatra, is something, it will be like Thailand, I think. Okay, now let us talk about the Tibet, the Indian Tibet Buddhist world. You have the Vikramashila monastery built by the Palak ruler, and this was one of the leading Buddhist centers in India. And they spread Tantric Buddhism to Nepal and Tibet. The other 2 important monasteries, universities, were Nalanda and Odantapuri. The 3 of them are 3 universities are in Bihar, and these monasteries attracted donations from Sumatra, from the Buddhist world, and they developed new Buddhist arts that influenced Nepal, Tibet, Yunnan, Java, Myanmar. But then later on, you have the invasion, Turco-Mongol army. This was during the Muslim invasion that destroyed all the major Buddhist monastic institutions in northern India. And so by the time you come to by the 13th century, Buddhism was completely uprooted in India and then disappeared. But because Buddhism was planted in other places, so Buddhism continued to survive. In some places, continued to flourish. Tibet inherited the Tantric Buddhist tradition developed during the Pala period. So this is one of the worlds, Buddhist world, Indian Tibet world. So Buddhism disappeared in India, but remained in the Himalayas and in Tibet. Then you have the East Asian Buddhist world. So Buddhism reached its peak during the Tang Dynasty, but Emperor Wuzong persecuted Buddhism and brought to its decline. So with all the schools that was established in China, only 2 survive, the Pure Land and Zen. And during the Song Dynasty, China was reunified. The monastic institutions recovered. And there was exchanges of Buddhism between Japan, Korea, and together with some of the nomadic states, and then later on moving up to even like Mongolia and all that. So Pure Land and Chan Buddhism became very popular amongst the lay Buddhists, and these practices also spread to Korea, Japan, and even Vietnam, especially North Vietnam. Then the third world will be the Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, Buddhist world. This is the Buddhist practice of Southeast Asia. Okay, and so actually in the 11th century, Sri Lanka became stronger in political power and also strengthened its maritime network. And because of the strength, political power, Buddhism was from Sri Lanka was able to spread to the other Southeast Asian countries. Now, at one time, there were three traditions in Sri Lanka. You have Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and even Tantric Buddhism being practiced in Sri Lanka itself. But in the 12th century, you had the king by the name of Parakamabahu. This king only wants Theravada tradition. So he doesn't want the other traditions. So he abolished the Mahayana and Vaishnava tradition. And because of that, in Sri Lanka now, you don't have these two traditions, only the Theravada tradition. It's because of this king. And so sometimes in the Buddhism in Sri Lanka flourish, sometimes there's a decline. And because that Theravada Buddhism has also gone to Myanmar, gone to Thailand, gone to Cambodia, they had support from Myanmar to help to revive Buddhism in Sri Lanka and as well as Thailand. For instance, our late chief Kesari Dhammananda comes from the Siam Nikaya. This is when Buddhism in Sri Lanka declined. So they had teachers from Thailand coming to Sri Lanka, ordaining the monks and giving them teachings. So that's why they call it the Siam Nikaya. Okay, so because of the interactions of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, wonderful about Sri Lanka, since it was established during the time of Emperor Ashoka, it continues to have this Buddhist heritage right up to this current day. So Buddhism came to Southeast Asia by sea from India. It also comes indirectly from Central Asia and China. So we also have that influence from Southeast Asia and China. At first, it was Mahayana Buddhism and also Tantric Buddhism that was predominant in our part of the world. And this declined. And then later on, we followed the Theravada tradition. For instance, Vietnam, the southern part of Vietnam, Cambodia, the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Java, received Mahayana Buddhism from India. So we actually had Mahayana Buddhism earlier here because this was part of the sea route from the 2nd century Common Era. But after that, the Mahayana Buddhism started declining. And like, for instance, Sumatra and Java, it was in Peninsula Malaysia, it was being replaced by Islam. Yeah. And then second wave of Buddhism comes from the Theravada, from Sri Lanka, from Burma, from Thailand, and especially also from China. That's how coming with the Chinese migrants. And this is also a map. It's a good map of how Mahayana Buddhism spread throughout Southeast Asia, especially during the Nalanda University days. So Mahayana Buddhism coupled with Tantric Buddhism coming to our part of the world, because the Buddhism was very vibrant in the Bihar area, and we have been influenced by that. So like Borobudur and all that was established during this time. And also in our part of the world, Sri Vijaya Empire was very powerful. It controls the sea actually, and the Malay Peninsula was part of this Sri Vijaya Empire. So actually we had been part of our capital would have been in Sumatra. We came under the influence of Sri Vijaya that was based in Indonesia. So Buddhism came to the Indonesian archipelago about the 5th century from India on the maritime route. And Buddhism rose to prominence during the Sri Vijaya dynasty and became one of the largest Buddhist kingdoms in Southeast Asia around 8th to the 12th century. So Yi Ching, who went by sea to India, he actually stopped in Sumatra to study Buddhism and to do his translation. So Palembang was the center of Buddhist learning, both for Mahayana and Vajrayana studies. So they've got many colleges and monasteries and many famous teachers and instructors next door in Sumatra. Okay. But this empire was being attacked by the India's Chola rulers, 11th century, and then the empire Srivijaya declined. And in Java, on the other hand, you got the Salendra dynasty. The Salendra and Srivijaya is somewhat joint; they're like co-rulers, and it's under the Salendra dynasty. At some time when they became Buddhist, they built the Borobudur. How about Buddhism in the Malay Peninsula? We had many centuries of Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism, which has influenced the Malay courts and the people. Actually, when we talk about the Malay kingdom, the Malayu kingdom, when I search for it, it's actually based in Sumatra. Although now when we say Tanah Melayu, we think it's Peninsula of Malaysia, but when you look at the history, it also applies to Sumatra as well. Okay. Now, Buddhist archaeologists finds in Bujang Valley in Kedah, they found Buddhist statues and sculptures and all that, some chandis. So you could see that we are pretty much influenced by what is happening between the interaction between China and India, and how Buddhism, because of the trade, how Buddhism picked up in the Malay Peninsula. So between the 7th to the 13th century, the maritime trading states came under control under various empires. We were under the Srivijaya, we were under the Khmers also. So we were under the Cambodians. Majapahit was again in Sumatra, and Ayutthaya was under the Thai. So we had, these are all the maritime trading powers. So you could see also on the east coast in Terengganu, Buddhist statues of stones and bronze tablets between the 5th and the 7th century. And but of course, by the time you come to the 11th century, both Sumatra and Peninsular Malaysia, Buddhism started declining, and then was being replaced by Islam. This is a map about early sites of Buddhism. Let me just go through very quickly Theravada Buddhism in Southeast Asia. So after Mahayana and Tantric decline, because of the rising power of Sri Lanka, Theravada Buddhism began to flourish. Okay, in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, but both Thailand and Myanmar could trace it back to Emperor Ashoka and the Third Buddhist Council. In the Theravada tradition, they had a Pali canon because they were using Pali, and because the Buddhist Theravada Buddhism is being practiced in these countries like Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka, they were strong. It helps to energize the Theravada tradition. They did here are some slides on the history of Buddhism in Myanmar. Buddhism started, they believe it actually came to the Mon people. The Mon is Lower Burma. They Lower Burma and Thailand, they were the first to adopt Theravada Buddhism. Okay, and then later on, the later kings like King Anawarta during the Bagan Empire received Theravada Buddhism and spread it across. So this is a brief history of the Myanmar Buddhism. In the case of Thailand, they absorbed Theravada Buddhism from the Mon people because the Mon people from Lower Myanmar, and later on by the 15th century, the Thais were sent to Sri Lanka for ordination and all that. And they returned with Sri Lanka monks to ordain the Thais. So because of this, during the time of the King Mongkut, he tried to revamp Buddhism into Thailand and establish the Dhammayuttikaya Nikaya that was based on the Sri Lankan tradition, and they were also strong on scholarship. Cambodia was also pretty much like that. Started off by having Mahayana Buddhism and Hinduism, but later on replaced by Theravada Buddhism because of the influence from the Thai. And Dhamma Yutikaya Nikaya was introduced in Cambodia from Thailand. Buddhism in Vietnam is divided into two spheres. If it is in the northern Vietnam, it is under the influence of the Chinese cultural influence. So they were really Mahayana. They were both Mahayana and non-Mahayana missions. And also many merchants stopped by in Vietnam. And because of that, that is how Buddhism also came to Vietnam and strengthened Vietnam because of the traders. In the northern part of Vietnam, they use the Chinese canon. Southern part of Vietnam, they use the Pali canon. It's quite interesting. And now, just to cap it all, I would like to play a video on the spread of Buddhism from the 5th century before Common Era, right up to the 1200 Common Era. All right, so then you can actually see how Buddhism has spread across the Asia, and how in some places Buddhism has also disappeared. Do you see now?
Yeah. Okay. Now we have the video.
Oh, you got a video.
Yep.
Okay. This is the spread of early Buddhism in the Gangetic Plain, First Buddhist Council. This is before sects. There was no only Second Buddhist Council that you begin to have two sects. So you got Staviravada as the Mahasangika. There's a breaking of the schism in the Second Buddhist Council. So the Mahasangika moved down south, as well as in Bengal area. Savastivada and Dhammakupta, now north of India, northwest India. Then Greco-Buddhism now. Now moving to the 80s, Sea Road open up. So Buddhism now moving along the trade routes. Dhammakupta, Savastivada and Dhammakupta moving along the trade routes. This is during the reign of Emperor Kanishka, King Kanishka. And then down to China. Oh yeah, Dhammakupta. Also Kushana Empire. The Kushana Empire is happened. And Buddhism started getting various parts of China. Dhammakupta was actually influential. Theravada now right into Myanmar. Buddhism went over to Korea. Northern Wei Dynasty. Maritime trade was now opening up.
Datuk Sri, have to speak louder, or
Yeah?
you have to speak louder. Can't hear your music over around you.
Okay. Music too loud. Sorry, I can't control that. Yeah. Maritime route. So you could see how our part of the world benefited from India and China's interaction. Buddhism in Japan. This is the Tang Dynasty. Buddhism reached its apex. So Mahayana and Vajrayana is pretty much in our world. Our part of the world is Mahayana and Vajrayana. China is Pure Land. Borobudur. Now Buddhism has gone to Tibet. So the Nyingma school, the first school, which is the Nyingma school. They had a revival in Tibet, revival of Buddhism. You see, Buddhism has almost like disappeared from India. Angkor Wat. Now Theravada has to be in Southeast Asia. Okay.
Wonderful sharing and a very informative exposition on the spread of Buddhism. So, would you like to close by some sharing of merits? Maybe make some dedications.
Okay. So let us share the merits that we have accumulated tonight, and may these merits that we have accumulated by listening to the Dhamma, by speaking the Dhamma, by being involved in the Dhamma activity, helps us in our path. That may we in our journey not associate with fools. May we always get the benefit of skillful teachers and good friends, and may we never stray from the Buddha Dhamma. May we one day achieve the highest bliss on Nibbana. Let us also share these merits with the Deva so that they continue giving blessings to all of us, and sharing these merits with our departed ones, and that if they are in need of some support from these merits, may these merits help them to gain a better rebirth.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.